Dennis Carter, the only son of the American oil tycoon James Carter, had everything a young man could want: wealth, privilege, and a path laid out for him to inherit the family empire. Yet beneath the gilded surface of his life, Dennis felt trapped, a prisoner in a golden cage built by generations of Carter ambition. James Carter was a man who believed in legacy above all else. His life was a testament to unrelenting discipline and a commitment to expanding the family's vast oil empire. Dennis admired his father's achievements, but their relationship was distant and transactional. When Dennis was a boy, James rarely attended his baseball games or school recitals. Instead, he sent his assistants, who brought pre-written cards and gifts with his name scrawled at the bottom. For James, success wasn't measured in family moments, but in boardroom triumphs and the ever-growing numbers on financial statements. By the time Dennis reached adulthood, the expectations placed on him were no longer subtle. Every move he made was watched and judged. His father's advisors scrutinized his academic achievements, his career choices, and even his social life. But nothing irked Dennis more than his father's insistence on controlling his personal relationships. Karen Winthrop was the epitome of what James Carter wanted in a daughter-in-law. She came from old money, her father owning a lucrative chain of oil refineries that perfectly complemented the Carter empire. Karen was beautiful, poised, and impeccably groomed for the role of the perfect trophy wife. But Dennis knew that beneath her polished exterior was someone who shared his father's love of power and strategy, a woman who saw their potential union as a business merger, not a marriage. Dennis, however, wanted more than a corporate fairy tale. He wanted love, messy, unpredictable, and genuine love. He yearned for someone who would see beyond his last name, someone who wouldn't measure him by the number of zeros in his bank account. The longing for something real gnawed at him, growing stronger every time he saw Karen's rehearsed smile or heard his father's lectures about duty and sacrifice. The tension came to a head one evening during a family dinner at the Carter estate. The sprawling mansion was filled with the hum of classical music and the clink of silverware against fine china. James Carter, as always, sat at the head of the table, his presence dominating the room. "Dennis," James said, swirling his glass of wine, "it's time we discuss your future. You and Karen have been seeing each other for quite some time now. The Winthrops are expecting an announcement." Dennis clenched his jaw, his fork frozen midway to his mouth. "An announcement?" "An engagement," James replied, his tone matter-of-fact. "You're almost 30, son. It's time to settle down and take your place in the family legacy." Karen, seated across from Dennis, gave him a calculated smile. She said nothing, but her eyes sparkled with the knowledge that she was the chosen one, the future Mrs. Carter. "I'm not ready," Dennis said, his voice firm but calm. James raised an eyebrow, setting down his glass. "Not ready? What nonsense is this? The merger with the Winthrop family is essential for our long-term strategy. This isn't just about you. It's about the family." Dennis pushed his plate aside, his appetite gone. "You mean it's about the company? That's all that ever matters to you, isn't it? The company, the profits, the image. What about what I want?" James's face darkened, his expression a blend of disappointment and anger. "What you want? You've been handed everything, Dennis. Do you think the world cares about your whims? This is your duty. Your responsibility. I'm not a pawn in your business games, Dad," Dennis shot back. "I deserve a chance to live my life on my terms." The room fell silent, the weight of his words hanging heavily in the air. Karen's smile faltered, and for the first time, she looked uncertain. Dennis stood, the chair scraping loudly against the marble floor. "I'm sorry, but I can't do this. Not like this." Without waiting for a response, he walked out of the dining room, his heart pounding as he left behind the expectations that had suffocated him for years. For the first time, Dennis felt a glimmer of freedom, even as he faced the uncertainty of defying his father's will. He didn't know what the future held, but one thing was clear: He wouldn't let anyone dictate the course of his life, not even James Carter. During a business trip to India to oversee a new joint venture, Dennis attended a university symposium as a guest speaker. The topic of the event was Innovating for a Sustainable Future. And while Dennis's presentation focused on economic strategies and the potential for sustainable growth in energy markets, he couldn't help but feel detached. The polished speech had been prepared by his father's PR team, devoid of the passion that Dennis secretly yearned to express. After his talk, he stayed to listen to the other speakers, a mix of academics, activists, and students. It was during this time that Sonia Mehra took the stage. Unlike the others, who relied on polished slides and rehearsed statistics, Sonia spoke with raw energy and undeniable authenticity. The true measure of progress, Sonia declared, her voice firm and unwavering, isn't the size of our GDP or the heights of our skyscrapers, but how we treat the people who are left behind. A sustainable future isn't just about technology or policies, it's about justice, empathy, and accountability. Her words struck a chord with Dennis, cutting through the veneer of his corporate upbringing. He couldn't take his eyes off her. Dressed simply in a white kurta with a brightly colored dupatta, Sonia exuded a natural elegance. Her fiery rhetoric was matched by the spark in her eyes, a mix of defiance and hope. As she continued, Dennis noticed how the room leaned in, captivated by her presence. Even the most aloof professors and business executives were spellbound. For Dennis, it was more than her eloquence. Sonia's conviction was something he rarely encountered in the circles he moved in. Her words weren't polished for approval or tailored to align with anyone's agenda. They were genuine, raw, and unapologetically challenging, a stark contrast to the calculated conversations Dennis had grown accustomed to. When Sonia finished, the audience erupted into applause, some even rising to their feet. Dennis joined in, his heart pounding with a strange mix of admiration and nervous energy. For the first time in years, he felt inspired by someone else's courage, their willingness to speak truth to power. As the symposium moved into a networking session, Dennis found himself lingering near the refreshments table, scanning the crowd for Sonia. He caught sight of her in a lively discussion with a group of students. Her passion hadn't dimmed, it seemed to grow with every word she spoke. Gathering his courage, Dennis approached her, his usual confidence replaced by an unfamiliar sense of vulnerability. As he drew closer, she turned to him, her eyes bright and curious. "You were incredible up there," Dennis began, his voice betraying a hint of nervousness. "I've attended a lot of these events, but your speech, it was different. Honest." Sonia studied him for a moment, her gaze sharp but not unkind. "Thank you," she replied. "Honesty is the least we can offer when talking about the future, don't you think?" Dennis nodded, momentarily at a loss for words. "I couldn't agree more. By the way, I'm Dennis Carter." "I know who you are," Sonia said, a small smile tugging at her lips. "The heir to the Carter oil empire. Your speech was interesting." Dennis chuckled, sensing the subtle critique in her tone. "Interesting? That's a polite way of saying it lacked heart, isn't it?" Sonia tilted her head, her smile widening. "Well, let's just say it was very corporate. But I suppose that's to be expected." Her bluntness was refreshing, even disarming. Dennis wasn't used to people speaking to him so candidly. "You're not wrong," he admitted. "It's a challenge to inject heart into numbers and projections. But you spoke with real passion. It's rare." Sonia's expression softened, and she gestured toward a quieter corner of the room. "If you're genuinely interested, I'd be happy to tell you why I'm so passionate about these issues. But fair warning, it's not the kind of conversation most people in your world want to hear." Dennis smiled, intrigued and eager. "I think I'd like that." What started as a brief conversation stretched into hours. Sonia spoke about her upbringing in a small village, the challenges her family faced, and the injustices she witnessed growing up. She shared her dreams of becoming a human rights lawyer, her determination to fight for those without a voice. Dennis listened intently, captivated by her every word. For the first time in his life, Dennis felt a connection that wasn't tied to wealth, power, or expectation. Sonia saw him not as a Carter but simply as Dennis, a man seeking meaning in a life overshadowed by privilege. And as the evening wore on, Dennis realized that meeting Sonia wasn't just a chance encounter. It was a moment that had the power to change everything. "Excuse me," he began. "Your speech was remarkable. I'm Dennis Carter. I'd love to hear more about your work." Sonia gave him a polite smile, her guard up. "Thank you, Mr. Carter. Justice is something we should all be passionate about. But I'm sure someone like you has bigger concerns than social reform." Her words, though pointed, intrigued Dennis. She wasn't swayed by his wealth or status, something he wasn't used to. "I think justice matters to everyone. Perhaps I could buy you a coffee, and you can tell me why you believe otherwise." Sonia hesitated, folding her arms across her chest. She'd had countless conversations like this before, with men in tailored suits who nodded politely but never truly listened. Yet there was something in Dennis's tone, a quiet determination that made her pause. "One coffee," she agreed, "but only because I want to hear your perspective too." They walked to a small cafe across the street, the kind with mismatched chairs and a chalkboard menu. Dennis held the door open for her, earning a small nod of acknowledgement. The scent of fresh coffee and baked goods filled the air as they found a corner table near the window. As they sat down, Sonia leaned back in her chair, arms still crossed. "So, Mr. Carter," she began, her voice tinged with skepticism, "what makes you think justice is a concern for everyone? Isn't it easy to say when you've already won the game?" Dennis studied her for a moment, unruffled by her directness. "That's fair," he admitted, clasping his hands together on the table. "I grew up in privilege. But that doesn't mean I haven't seen inequality, or felt its effects. My father built his company from nothing, and I've seen how the system breaks people who don't have the same opportunities. It's why I started funding educational programs and legal aid initiatives." Sonia raised an eyebrow. "Charity is nice, but it doesn't dismantle the systems causing the harm. If anything, it keeps them alive by soothing consciences." Dennis smiled faintly. "True. But reform needs allies, doesn't it? People who can open doors that have been shut for too long?" Her expression softened slightly, though her skepticism remained. It's not enough to open doors if you don't change what's on the other side. Too often, it's just the same game, with a few new players. The barista arrived with their drinks, interrupting the tension. Sonia stirred her coffee absent-mindedly, her gaze fixed on Dennis. He took a sip of his espresso and leaned forward, his tone earnest. "You're right, Sonia. I don't have all the answers. But I'm here because I want to learn from people like you, people who live this fight every day. If there's a better way to make an impact, I want to hear it. Help me understand." Her posture relaxed, if only slightly. It's not often someone in your position admits they don't have all the answers. She took a sip of her coffee, her tone softening. "All right, Dennis. Let's talk about what justice really means, and why charity, on its own, is never enough." The conversation that followed was candid and intense, spanning topics from systemic oppression to corporate responsibility. By the time they finished their drinks, the sun had begun to set, casting a warm glow over the cafe. Sonia stood, gathering her things. "Thank you for the coffee, Mr. Carter. I appreciate the conversation. But if you're serious about making a difference, it'll take more than words." Dennis rose as well, slipping a business card onto the table. "I don't just want to talk. I want to work with people who know how to create real change. If you're interested, call me." Sonia glanced at the card but didn't pick it up right away. "We'll see," she said with a small smile, turning to leave. As she walked out, Dennis watched her go, feeling both challenged and inspired. This wasn't the end of their conversation, he was sure of it. Sonia looked at him, her eyes reflecting the warm glow of the city lights below. For a moment, she said nothing, her expression caught between surprise and something deeper. The silence stretched just long enough for Dennis to begin doubting himself, but then she spoke. "Dennis," she began, her voice steady yet soft, "you have no idea how much that means to me. But this." She gestured to the space between them. "This isn't just about us. It's about two worlds that rarely meet, let alone understand each other. You've already crossed so many boundaries for me, and that's not something I take lightly." Dennis leaned closer, his gaze unwavering. "It's not about boundaries, Sonia. It's about what's real. You've shown me a world I've been blind to my whole life. For the first time, I feel like I'm not just existing, I'm living." She smiled, a flicker of vulnerability breaking through her composed exterior. "It's not easy, you know. Loving someone like me means accepting all of it, the fights, the risks, the uphill battles. I don't come with a neatly packaged future. And I don't want a neat package," he replied without hesitation. "I want the raw, the real, the everything. With you." Her defenses softened, and for the first time in a long while, Sonia let herself lean into the moment. The cool evening breeze wrapped around them as Dennis reached for her hand. "You're stubborn," she said with a teasing smirk. "But I like that." Dennis chuckled, brushing his thumb over her fingers. "I'll take that as a yes." Sonia didn't answer right away. Instead, she turned her gaze back to the city below, her thoughts racing. Could this truly work? Could their lives, so different in origin and trajectory, intertwine without breaking apart under the weight of expectations? After what felt like an eternity, she finally looked back at him. "I can't promise it'll be easy. But maybe. It's worth trying." Dennis smiled, the kind of smile that lit up his entire face. "That's all I need to hear." The two sat there, hand in hand, as the city below buzzed with life. In that moment, amidst the chaos of the world, they found a quiet kind of hope. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. And for now, that was enough. Dennis stiffened, his grip tightening on his phone. He had expected resistance from his father but hadn't anticipated such blatant disdain. Taking a deep breath, he steadied his voice. "Sonia isn't just some girl, Dad. She's brilliant, driven, and compassionate, everything you claim to value in people. Or does that only apply when they fit into your social circle?" James's face darkened. "You don't understand the stakes here, Dennis. This isn't just about you. The Carter name represents generations of influence and reputation. Aligning yourself with someone like her jeopardizes everything." "Someone like her?" Dennis repeated, his voice rising. "You mean someone who's worked for everything she has? Someone who actually cares about making the world a better place? Unlike the Winthrops, who are more interested in cocktail parties and trust funds." James slammed a hand on his desk, his face red with anger. "Enough, Dennis. You don't get to throw away our legacy over a fleeting infatuation. Karen understands our world. She's your equal." "No, Dad," Dennis shot back, his voice trembling with restrained fury. "Karen understands your world, a world I don't want to be part of anymore. Sonia is my equal, in every way that matters." The line went dead, leaving Dennis staring at the blank screen. He knew this fight was far from over, but he felt a flicker of defiance ignite within him. For the first time, he wasn't going to let his father dictate his life. Sonia, meanwhile, had her own battles to face. News of her relationship with Dennis spread quickly, sparking judgment and gossip among her peers. Some of her law school classmates whispered behind her back, speculating about her intentions. "A billionaire's heir?" one of them remarked during a study group. Talk about aiming high. Sonia forced herself to ignore the comments, but they stung nonetheless. She confided in her best friend, Priya, during a late-night walk. "It's like everyone suddenly thinks they know who I am," she said, her voice heavy with frustration. "I worked my entire life to prove I belong here, and now all they see is Dennis. Priya stopped and turned to her. You've always been more than someone's girlfriend, Sonia. Don't let their insecurities make you doubt yourself. If Dennis truly cares about you, he'll stand by you, and the rest doesn't matter. A week later, Dennis showed up unannounced at Sonia's apartment, his face pale but determined. We need to talk, he said, stepping inside. Sonia's heart sank. What happened? My father, Dennis began, running a hand through his hair. He's threatening to cut me off. No money, no inheritance, nothing. Her eyes widened. Dennis, you don't have to, he cut her off. Yes, I do. Sonia, this isn't about money or family politics anymore. It's about standing up for what I believe in. For us. Sonia looked at him, her chest tightening. You'd give all of that up? For me? For us, Dennis corrected. His voice steady. I'd rather build something real with you than stay trapped in a life that doesn't mean anything. Tears filled her eyes, but she quickly blinked them away. You don't have to prove anything to me, Dennis. I don't need your wealth or your name. I just want you. And you have me, he said, taking her hands in his. For as long as you'll have me. For the first time in weeks, Sonia felt a sense of clarity. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but as long as they faced it together, she knew they could weather whatever storms came their way. Dennis stood firm. Sonia is not just some girl, Dad. She's brilliant, compassionate, and everything I've ever wanted in a partner. I won't marry Karen. James was relentless. If you choose her, you'll lose everything, your inheritance, your place in this family, everything. When Dennis told Sonia about his father's ultimatum, she was devastated. Dennis, I can't let you give up your entire life for me, she said, tears in her eyes. Your father is right. You have so much to lose. Dennis cupped her face in his hands. Sonia, none of that matters without you. I'd rather live a simple life with you by my side than have all the wealth in the world without you. Unbeknownst to Dennis, Sonia had been hiding a secret of her own. She wasn't just a law student from a modest family. She was the daughter of Rajesh Mehra, India's powerful Minister of Justice. She had chosen to keep her identity hidden, wanting to be valued for who she was, not for her family's influence. When James flew to India unannounced to confront Sonia's family, he was shocked to discover the truth. Greeted by armed security and government officials, James found himself in the grand estate of Rajesh Mehra. Mr. Carter, Rajesh said, his tone calm but authoritative. I understand you've come to discuss my daughter. But let me assure you, Sonia has made her own choices. If she loves your son, it's because of who he is, not because of what he has. James, humbled by the revelation, saw Sonia in a new light. Over dinner that evening, he observed her grace, intellect, and the genuine love she shared with Dennis. For the first time, he questioned his own prejudices. Months later, Dennis and Sonia were married in a breathtaking ceremony blending Indian and American traditions. The vibrant celebration was a testament to the power of love and unity. Dennis wore a traditional sherwani, while Sonia dazzled in a red and gold lehenga. At the reception, James gave a heartfelt speech. I was wrong to judge Sonia before knowing her. She has shown me the strength of character and love that truly matter. Today, I'm proud to call her my daughter. Dennis and Sonia's love story became a symbol of what was possible when two worlds collided, not in conflict, but in harmony. Together, they built a life not defined by wealth or power, but by respect, love, and a shared vision for the future.